Howdy nerds. So, you want to own a game store? This is what you do all day long. Sorting cards. This is going to give you a video today, so way too busy. We have pre-release going on. So a couple of those will start to fire here in, I don't know, like an hour or so. So in between that, try to keep myself busy and do what every store owner is sick of, which is sorting cards. Which, speaking with, I think that makes a good segue into a discussion that I've been seeing a lot of, a new trend, starting with Pokemon, but it's also, I've noticed, starting to affect things like One Piece and Lorcana even, and Magic, which is the return of what I want to say the zero play space game store that we've been seeing pop up like crazy. Now, this is kind of an argument that I've had, not really an argument, kind of a disagreement with business models with many, I don't know if I want to call them wannabe store owners, but people that have tried to make this work in the past. I think we started to see this sort of business model. I'd even say pre-2014, it was very common to see them in strip malls, to see them in malls. I mean, malls are kind of a thing of the past now. Or in very, very high populated area of the game store. And now we're even seeing GameStops. That's one other thing I've been noticing with the GameStop really turning their model from selling video games now to selling Pokemon cards and grading Pokemon cards. And I don't know, I personally don't like this trend. A, from a business standpoint, and B, just as like, to me, they almost seem unnecessary. In a day and age of like online, the only point to a game store is the physical space, in my opinion. Otherwise, you can do it with this, like zero overhead, well, not zero overhead, but little overhead, you know, out of a basement or out of a house. And at that point, retail space only makes sense if you can get a ton of walk-in traffic. And so what we're doing here is sorting cards. So this, in my opinion, is the entire reason for a game store. I know some people have made some good grind on selling online or having more of an online presence, but the game store, you end up being a little economy by itself. So, you know, our bread and butter has always been, and I'm so surprised when when stores don't actually engage. I know it's time consuming. I know you have to know what you're doing. But being the center of the market, I think, is a whole point to having a local game store, and it's very, very lucrative at that point. So we get a ton of cards. I mean, a ton of cards coming in from people selling their collection, but the vast majority of cards that we get in are from events. So things like drafts, things like pre-releases, rotations, when people rotate through decks. This is usually the most lucrative time to be a game store, because you get to basically triple dip on cards. So one of the best things about owning the store is, you know, we use store credit. So store credit has to be, of course, used within store. So we're already making margins on that, because then when we sell sealed product, you know, that's being marked up. And so the store credit that we're giving for cards is usually lower than market value. And you can see how all that starts to lead to really good margins. And it's always surprised me. It seems to be that the game store owners that have play space, so if you think about most of your mom and pops, there seems to be a certain personality that starts those, and those are usually the board gamers. And I see so many stores start up by board game enthusiasts. So usually it's a couple. I mean, here in Utah, maybe you can tell me what you see in other parts of the US, but it typically is like older couple, semi-retired, where one of them really wants to start a store, the other one still has a full-time job, and they pull together resources and they start a, we're gonna have to, Buttons is probably gonna start howling because there's a siren outside. I don't know if people can hear that, but we were right by a fire department. Oh man, Buttons usually starts going crazy when he hears sirens. Anyway, and then the store owner is like, I just want a place to play board games with all my buddies. Or maybe it'd be miniatures, but it's usually that tabletop or board game type personality that ends up starting a store. And then they reluctantly realize that there's just no money to be made in board games. They think that they can, you know, push through or sell through enough miniatures or board games. But, I mean, you would really, really have to come from a very, very high populated area just to have enough of that demographic. And that demographic does not spend nearly the amount of money, and margin-wise too, on things like board games or even tabletop games compared to card games. Card games are the entire reason for opening a store. And so what I'm seeing now is kind of less of that mom and pop board game enthusiast, let's go start a store, let's reluctantly get into Magic, let's reluctantly host Magic. And it's funny because those are the typical stores that don't do this. They don't sell singles, which I think they're missing out on huge margins. And I mean, they're too disinterested in learning kind of the Magic economy. And it is a grind. Like I said, it's mind-numbing to do this all the time, to list cards, to sort cards, to you really get sick of opening packs. That's one thing. If you loved opening packs before, Zach was a pack addict. He's next to me here. It's good old Zach, sorting cards too. This is a great way to break that addiction, is to start a store and sort cards all day. And then you'll detest looking at cards. You'll be like, oh, here's another one. And yeah, I mean, we're pretty far behind too because we're both burnt out from just sorting so many cards. I think it's always a rule of thumb in our stores, whenever we get everything sorted, someone comes and sells their collection. And then we're like, oh God, here we go again. We just had it all sorted. Now it's time to start back from square one and start sorting again. So anyway, so what we're seeing now, which is kind of disturbing to me though, is, let's back up. I think that the mom and pop though, they still play a pivotal role. Because I think that tabletop games, board games, and card games, they need the LGS model to survive. I think that, I mean, Pokemon players, of course, will disagree with me. They think that people will just have a place, open cards, go back to their house, collect it, whatever. But there still is a vibrant Pokemon, and Pokemon's really pushing it now, too. And I think it's smart of them, too, with Pokemon Pocket, which they're trying to bleed into Pokemon TCG, which then they're trying to encourage people to go into paper Pokemon at the store level and actually play in events and whatnot, because all that ecosystem, I got to give it to Pokemon. They really do know that is a vital, a critical role in their kind of ecosystem to keep the game going. So anyway, those mom and pop stores, I think, even though that they don't really, a lot of them don't fully double down or embrace this part of the aspect of the game store, which is most lucrative, they still play that very vital role of having a play space. And, you know, all that comes with purchases of sleeves and accessories, like that, to me, is the whole local game store model. So it's kind of awkward now that I'm seeing that it change back to these small strip stores that have zero play space, or the GameStops have zero play space. And they're actually making a go at just being a storefront with no play space. Now, of course, the overhead is way lower. Like if you can look at our area here in our store, we have a tiny play space. We have 2 rooms though dedicated to play space, and we can fit about 30 people before we really get crowded. I mean, honestly, we can fit about 20 people before we're crowded, and then I mean, we've had times where we've just put some tables in the main room here too to have more space. But if you really want a big, vibrant store, I mean, you have to dedicate a massive amount to retail space. And a lot of people have, crunched the number like, hey, I'll just have a regular storefront without any play space. Well, I think that's like dangerous on twofolds. And I'm hoping that things like One Piece, I know that that's another game that is, Bandai has become more strict with stores having play space, proving you have play space. Lorcana too is now trying to go on that model. And I think they're trying to discourage, and I agree with them, this sort of business model coming up. But Pokemon, that's the one I've seen so many startups with people that have zero play space and just have, Pokemon from wall to wall. And I guess if you're in an area that can actually justify that, then it is something that is viable. But like I said, it's kind of disturbing in two ways, because I actually think that the industry should encourage that people have to pony up to get a actual place to play, because this is where games are demoed, this is where games are actually played. Not everyone is a super ultra introvert that wants to go home and just play with their close friends or collect by themselves. And I think that these games are the most vibrant when there is that store scene. And we're actually seeing Wizards of the Coast really start to embrace that as well. We're trying to bring back store championships, trying to bring back PTQs, regionals, things like that to encourage. A lot of the promos too are more geared with people playing. I think that's an excellent thing that they're doing. So I don't know, I guess that's kind of the question that I have, since I'm not getting anything done here when I actually talk. To all y'all, what is it like in your area? You're starting to see these little pop-ups. I actually don't think they're gonna survive, because I don't see any advantage over just doing it online. And you can, right there, you can just having a storefront is going to be massive overhead to begin with. And you're probably still, if you're at the point where you have a vibrant enough or enough traffic where you can get people in to just make purchases after purchases, you have to hire employees at that point. And yeah, it's to me, I don't think it's necessarily the most viable business structure. Maybe I'm the way of the dinosaur. Maybe this LGS model is not the way to go. But it's weird though that we've done like this complete like 180 back to where we were like before 10 years ago, where it's like, okay, we're gonna have these high traffic areas. They're gonna sell above MSRP for just people that are just wanting things now, coming home from like work or whatever, or in, like I said, these high traffic areas, and they're gonna be crazy about getting their Pokemon or Magic packs. Just come in, buy it, go home and play at home or collect at home. And I guess if the market's there, the market's there. But I kind of want to see to put this back out to the rest of you. Is this what you're seeing in your areas? Is the LGS model? And I'm afraid that we're gonna go through another boom of people trying to start stores and become oversaturated. Again, I'm not just saying this from a standpoint that I already have a store and I don't want competition. Of course I don't. Like I want to be a monopoly in my area. I don't want to have any sort of competition. But it gets pretty crazy when the markets get hot, when everyone and their dog tries these stores. And as I stated, I've just seen so many in the past few weeks pop up of having these kind of hybrid online / storefront without any play space whatsoever, to try to keep the overhead as low as possible, but the kind of retail space as maximum as possible. And again, I don't foresee it working out in the long run. So kind of weird time we're in with even that now coming into the mix. I'd like to see your thoughts and comments. And you know, this channel and my other channels, I've really tried to stress the importance of LGSs. Like I am a fan of Main Street. I am a fan of having like we have a shoe store next to us, and a lot of people shop on Amazon or Temu now, and they don't get their shoes from. I know shoes are one of them that people like to try on. There's that whole demographic of people, and then there's like hardware stores that of course are going to need to exist because of you have to physically go get those. But a lot of like the things we've seen disappear from main streets are like retail things that just sold products. And it makes it, sometimes convenience leads to inconvenience, where it used to be you could just go down to the whatever store you needed for whatever the retail thing that you happen to need, and you could actually get it. But now with online, that's pushed a lot of those out in the last 10 to 15 years. That's kind of like, I've tried to beat home the LGSs have this specific need and reason to exist, because games need to be played. That they can't quite hit their pinnacle, they can't quite hit the success that they could hit if there is no place to play their games. Like the whole adage is you can't go play your cards at Target. There has to be some place for people to meet back together. But I don't know. That's again what I'm kind of reaching out. I wonder what my viewers are. Are you more go to like again? Magic was I only played. Well, I did have friends I played with, but if there was a game store, I was always playing at that game store. There have been very few times I've played Magic the Gathering, not at a convention or not at a game store. I haven't just gone over to a friend's house and played Magic. Done it with board games, a little bit 50-50 with that. About 50% of the time I played at a game store, 50% I do have friends and families that do that. But I'm interested in kind of like your takes on the LGS model, and if you think that's going to be a successful thing going forward. And kind of, I just see so many massive pitfalls, not just for the stores themselves, but if this becomes the trend. Yeah, I always go back to the Everdell story. There was a board game called Everdell that was insanely popular, and it got the hubris became so huge. They're like, okay, we don't need game stores. So they actually took their product off distribution, and they went direct to consumer through Amazon, and their sales just tanked. It just plummeted because they thought, okay, we're a household name now. Everyone knows about Everdell. We can just keep printing expansions. People just buy. It's so much easier on DTC. We get a bigger cut. Then we pay Amazon, of course, but we get a bigger cut, and everything will just work out swimmingly. And then it didn't, and the sales plummeted. And now Everdell is one of them that's really strict ongoing through the distribution route. So it'll be interesting to see how Pokemon and One Piece and Lorcana and all these things start to react to these this kind of new wave of stores that are just retail only, or these GameStops that are starting to convert over to retail only. And I don't want to see they'll just go the way of the dinosaur. Like I said, I have a lot of memories, and I mean, I think pre-release is the whole reason why we started this store. This is like the whole stinking reason. Like I've got a lot of people soliciting me lately. Like, I'm trying to start my own store. Can I pick your brain about how to start one? I'm like, you don't want to pick our brain. We are not the right people to try to mirror or to kind of do a game store. It only works because, first of all, Zach and I have a good working relationship where we bounce off really well of this store. And it's like, it only works because of our personalities and our places in life. And I tell people, because I don't want to call it not legit, but it's not like a legit, like where you have like a hierarchy of employees and like a boss and regular opening hours, and trying to be this like we have been able to kind of go with the flow and figure out what works for us personally and for our customers, and still maintain proper revenue streams and whatnot to cover the overhead. And I think that people try to replicate what we do, it would fail miserably, because I think they'd have to go more of a traditional route of doing business, and yeah, we're not the right people. So it's kind of, I always get a kick when people do reach out and like, hey, can I pick your brain? But yeah, I'm not the right person to do it. So anyway, that's kind of a discussion. I need to get back to sorting this stuff because we're going to have a pre this year, and I want to feel productive. We're just building up with some of the cards you see here. It's just all this Duskmorn that's been building up that we haven't got to, and unfortunately, cards need to be sorted if you want to sell them. So that's what I got going. I'll see you guys next time.